Welcome to Aging Insights. I'm Grace Egan, Executive Director of the New Jersey Foundation for Aging. Our mission is to promote policies and programs that enable seniors to live with independence and dignity in their communities. Aging Insights is produced by the New Jersey Foundation for Aging to provide information and resources to boomers, seniors, and caregivers. Today we're going to talk about emergency preparedness. I have in the studio with me Michael S. Weber, Emergency Preparedness Manager, Electric from PSE&G, and Melissa Acree, Executive Director of NJ211 Partnership. In previous Aging Insights programs, we've spoken about emergency plans and emergency supplies. It's important to have some minimal supplies on hand, like a flashlight with batteries, water, and a supply of non-perishable foods. If you must evacuate, which we've seen in previous years, be sure and take your medications list, your medication, your contact numbers, your cell phone, and the charger. But today we want to talk about the services of NJ211 and your utility company that may help you be better prepared for an emergency and what assistance they may provide to you during a disaster. Thank you both for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I think it's an important topic. And Melissa, I understand that NJ211 is a national referral service that many states have as well. So please give our viewers a brief history of NJ211.
Sure, Grace. NJ211 is a nonprofit and a nationally accredited organization that is 12 years young. We are a subsidiary of the United Ways of New Jersey. And our service is to offer help and hope through information and referrals for health and human services. And we've been doing that, as I mentioned, for 12 years. And we can be reached by phone, chat, text, email. We have over 10,000 resources in our database.
Really? So, you know, I always think of it as a call service, but it's interesting that over the years you've really evolved into other ways to contact you. What kind of calls do you get?
We get a wide variety of calls from people all ages. Usually it's life's most basic needs. People call for financial assistance with utilities, food, clothing, affordable housing, transportation. It's a wide gamut.
And who's answering the phone?
We have highly trained community resource specialists that go through initial 2 weeks of training and then continue throughout the year, being well-versed on social services and the systems we use and the varied programs that we assist with.
You must have quite a database, I mean, I would imagine.
We do. Over 3,000 agencies are represented, and as I mentioned, 10,000 services. And we do follow standards to make sure that the information is well vetted, it's up to date, and we have good relationships with the agencies that we have in our database.
I understand that sometimes your staff may assist a caller with a warm referral, and I think it's an interesting term. So can you explain to our viewers?
Sure. A warm referral simply means that that caller has some needs that are identified by our specialists. They may be vulnerable in some way, and that by calling the agency on their behalf and giving a little introduction to the caller, we then directly transfer that caller over to the agency so it's seamless and they get the right help that they need.
Is it easier, do you think, for people to find the services they need on your website versus calling?
You know, I think it depends on the individual. Some people like to do their own research and they like to be on a website and search our database. It's the same database that our community resource specialists use, but a lot of people still like talking to a person because our specialists can really assess, and often they'll come up with other things that might be beneficial and helpful for the caller that they didn't even think about. So it really just depends on what the person prefers.
Well, I also understand that you have a lot of languages listed, but I don't know that the website is in multi-languages, but the the staff is? The staff
Well,
can
our
handle it?
staff, we have bilingual staff. So many of our specialists are Spanish speaking. And for anyone that calls in with any other language, we can use an interpreter service. So we have a three-way conversation, and the interpreter just interprets that caller's needs. We also have our website that can be translated into over 170 languages with the press of a button.
Oh, your website can?
Yes.
Well, that's very helpful,
So
I think.
it really is multilingual, free, confidential service.
It sounds very helpful. You know, today's program, we're really focusing on emergency preparedness, and NJ211, I know, has a special service called Register Ready.
Yes.
So I would really appreciate you explaining how it works and how you get the information and, you know, the process.
Sure. Register Ready is an initiative that we're very proud to have been involved with for many years. And it really is a statewide database that captures the needs of seniors, people with disabilities, anyone that may have an access or functional need that is important for the county to be prepared for.
So they have a mobility issue.
Correct, a
Okay.
mobility issue.
Okay.
So what that means is that every person who has that type of need should register in Register Ready. And they should do it themselves or the service we provide, and we encourage people to call 211, and our specialists will do it for them. They'll register them. It takes a few minutes to answer all the questions, and then every year they need to re-register. So
Every year?
Every year. Otherwise, it gets archived, and then the county is not aware of the needs of the individuals living there.
So that's important. I didn't know that it's really only good for 1 year. I think that's important, and I'm
Yes.
surprised, and I'm sure many of our viewers who may have used the service in the past might be surprised as well. People move and things change.
Correct.
Makes sense.
And typically people when they register themselves, they'll get an email reminding them to do it. However, if 211 has registered them, they'll get an email, but they need to call 211 because the way the system works is we have the information that we put in, so we need to put it in this following year for them. And I can't stress how important it is to do it in advance of a disaster.
Oh, sure.
That's the information that counties will refer to when they're making sure that their emergency readiness plans are intact.
Well, that's really what I wanted to ask you. So once you have the list, what do you do with it?
Well, the list is managed by the state, and the different counties will access the database. So our role is just to enter the person into the system, and then the counties will access those lists and prepare their counties accordingly.
Okay, so I'm going to drill down a little bit.
Okay.
So NJ211, then it goes to the state, but you mean the Office of Emergency Management?
Correct, the Office of Emergency Management
Okay.
at the state level. But each county has an Office of Emergency Management, and they look at their particular county's needs. How many people are in wheelchairs, so how many ramps
Okay.
do we need, and so forth.
And so during a disaster, you're presuming that people are pulling up that list in terms of helping people evacuate or serving
Yes.
them in their home.
And even in advance of the disaster, because they're constantly making sure that they have up-to-date information today, so that if something
Right.
happens in 2 months, they're ready for it.
Exactly. And now you also provide some services during a disaster, is that right?
We do. We actually are one of the partners involved in the state emergency management plan that we provide information before any type of disaster. It could be natural or man-made. So we're pushing out information on safety, how to prepare your homes for a disaster.
Pushing it out where? To whom?
We're pushing it out to the public so that people know they can call 211. We're going to give them the latest information that we have regarding, for example, a storm that's coming.
Okay.
If there's any areas that are told they have to evacuate, we'll share that, where they can go for shelter, what they can do to prepare themselves and their homes. During a disaster, we are operating 24/7 as always, and we're the voice of reason during the disaster,
so.
reminding people to be in safe places in their homes.
Okay.
We can even escalate calls that are emergency calls that can't get through to 911.
Oh, really?
We sometimes can escalate those calls so that those individuals can be helped.
So you're still maintaining staff on the line during a disaster?
Yes, we actually increase, and everyone is hands on deck, 24/7. We did that for Hurricane Sandy,
Right.
and handled over 85,000 calls in 3 months.
Did you tell me that you were actually sitting in the emergency Office of Emergency Management in Trenton?
We can do that,
Can do
or
that.
we would be at our location and be on conference calls hourly, 3 times a day, that I would be hearing all of
Right.
the latest information from the state.
Well, you know, it's interesting now, wherever you are in New Jersey, we know that people have been struck by disasters or emergency situations. And oftentimes, it really is the utility company that is, you know, that's the first thing people realize. They don't have electricity, or because they don't have electricity, now they don't have water, and they don't have a variety of things that rely on their electric company. So I'm glad that Mike is here today. So I think it's important to understand the role of the utility companies during a disaster and what crucial services you can prepare. So since you're from PSE&G, Mike, what percentage of the households in the state are served by PSE&G?
So we use our territory as basically an area that goes from New York City to Philadelphia. I use the analogy, it's 10 or 15 miles each side of the turnpike, and it serves about 75% of the population of the state of New Jersey. We use 3/4 of the citizens. 2.2 million electric meters, 1.8 million gas meters, which interpret to about 6 million electric customers in the state. So it is by far the largest majority.
I was going to say, so it's, I'm happy to have you here so you can explain, and probably people will understand it in terms of their own utility company, you know, what you do. I mean, so is there helpful information that people should tell their utility company?
There are several things that folks can and should tell their utility company. Some of the things piggyback on what the folks at 211 are doing with Register Ready. When we sign a customer up, we'll ask if there are any medical issues in the house that we should be aware of. Primarily medical life support units where they're really dependent on electric. We'll ask them at the time to provide us the information. We will send them some information to confirm with their doctor, and then we'll go ahead and register those folks in our system to know that they have those maybe extenuating circumstances during the time of a power outage.
Well, you know, it's funny. I'm going to interrupt for a second because I think now I've been in my particular home for 30 years. I have the same utility company, and I would have never thought of saying, oh, things have changed either for my life circumstance in terms of mobility or for anybody else living with me. So I think that's kind of an interesting piece, because you say about new customers, but it's probably helpful for ongoing customers to keep you up to date.
It absolutely is, and like the folks at 211 update annually, we do as well. Just to make sure conditions hadn't changed or changed. Do you have a new person living in your house? Have your condition changed, improved or not improved? So we like to check in every year to make sure we're aware of it as well. And ultimately, it helps us in setting priorities for restoring customers.
Well, when there is a disaster, or there is a, you know, sometimes it's not a national disaster or a state disaster, it's a local power line that's down, whether it's an accident or something. How do you know there's a break in service? I'm just curious.
So that's an interesting question. Here in 2017, everyone presumes we know the lights are out.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, we don't. And we talk about that. There are 3 ways to at least get to public service. And that you can call us at 1-800-436-PSEG. You can go on to pseg.com, and you can register an outage as well. And then you can even text on social media, OUT to 4PSEG.
Ah, well.
Those are 3 avenues.
Right.
The point we like to stress is, even though you think we might not know, we do not know. So it's important for folks to call.
Right.
And some of the things we're looking for them to provide us are, we call it the golden ticket in the utility. Tell us something that happened. There's a tree on a wire across the street from my house. That's helpful to us. because some of our circuits, based upon the age of our system, could run 2 or 3 miles through multiple towns.
Sure.
So if we don't have that golden ticket, we don't know where to begin to search for what could have put the power out. We have to send our troubleshooters out to find out where that problem could be. So if you have information like that, that's most helpful to us in expediting, at least identifying where the problem is, and then helping the restoration process.
So besides telling you their particular incident, why their power's down and where they are, if they have not necessarily registered or told anybody in the past, my spouse relies on oxygen, or somebody's in a motorized wheelchair, and the battery is low.
Right.
Are those things that people should tell you too?
Those are things they should tell us as well.
Right.
We always encourage folks to register
Right.
with 211 because that really helps the emergency management folks to have an inventory of those people they potentially could worry about. Surely we're going to ask everyone to be prepared on their own as well. If you have backup batteries or backup abilities,
Right.
if you may potentially be evacuated, pay attention and then make a plan to maybe go to an alternate location. So the emergency management folks
Right.
don't have to have fewer people to worry about.
Right. I just noticed in a flyer from my utility company that it says, and be sure and keep your landline. Well, because they last longer during service, but given all of the cable networks that are providing phone service now, some of these landlines are not really landlines anymore. So it's kind of an interesting, I thought it was an interesting reference in the handout. So how do you sort of mentioned prioritizing a response. How do you prioritize a response?
So effectively, and we share this with all our large customers from the big hospital users
Sure.
to rectors, they all know. Our priorities during an outage are going to be hospitals, police and fire stations or locations, because we're trying to provide power to those emergency first responders who need to help folks in the community. Our priority customers who have identified themselves will be right up in that priority as well. And then we typically look for, we'll concentrate on blocked roads if it's an important road that leads to a hospital or a critical area. And then we will focus on, and almost all utility companies do the same thing, we focus on the largest number of customers out because we're trying to restore as many back as possible. The last person to be restored will be folks like myself who live on the end of the cul-de-sac.
Right.
Those one-offs at the end of the cul-de-sac, unfortunately, we need to prepare a little bit better because we're trying to get the most customers back the quickest possible.
And so is there a difference, I guess, between between electric and gas? I guess if you lose electricity, you don't necessarily lose your source of natural gas, right?
That's correct. Not typically. You could typically
Just thought about it.
we'll see a loss of gas in more of a flood environment when there's flooding involved. And interestingly enough, then the restoration process will start a couple days later with a flooding incident because it still takes time for the waters to recede and then to clean that equipment and then to access every house.
So you must have some safety tips for customers during a power outage?
One thing we always try to stress during any kind of outage, large or small, is that please stay away from downed wires. We have trained professionals who work with them. They wear their proper equipment knowing the power is energized or not energized on that line because we always presume it's a live wire. So we tell folks that we train internally, stay at least 50 feet away from any wire. We don't necessarily know what wire it is. In most cases we do. Our trained professionals who are out there every day can tell you if it's a cable wire, a telephone wire, or our wire. But if you're looking at it from a distance, you don't know. So we ask you really to be very cautious. We also stress, because we have a fair amount of customers who have backyard service, to please.
I'm sorry, what is?
They'll have, their power comes in, instead of having street poles, poles in the street in front of the house, they'll have backyard service where the poles go through the backyards.
Interesting.
We ask them to be even more careful if there is an incident and you have down trees, down poles, or down wires, because you don't know where that wire is. And we ask them to be even more cautious when they're exploring, trying to assess the damage to their house.
Do you ask them not to assess the damage?
Yes, for the most part we
Okay.
do. For the most part we do. We will we'll ask them to report it, to report that they have power out at their house. Give us some specifics. There's a broken pole in my backyard. That's helpful. But for the most part, let us do that.
And are you presuming that when you call and there's an outage that you're actually speaking to a person?
So there's several ways in.
Okay.
As I mentioned, there's electronic, and the system will catch that. You can call in, and we give you the option. If you just want to report an outage, hit a certain number, and that'll get recorded. Or you can stay on the line and talk to someone. If you have some vital information that's helpful to us, we ask you to stay on the line. Our computer system will take all those calls that are on similar circuits and then identify it. It will then draw a conclusion that there must be going something on in a specialized area or a specified area. So all those calls do add up, and they are helpful to us for determining exactly what circuits may be impacted.
Well, I also understand that besides the utility work, that a utility company also works with first responders or local emergency responders. So how is that relationship developed?
So we're doing that throughout the year, through either a series of exercises that we do, both on the electric and gas side, and that primarily is at the county and municipal level, where we'll involve police departments, fire departments, offices of emergency management, the emergency operations centers, EMS. We'll do exercises. We've done 10 exercises in gas, simulating a gas leak environment. We did 12 over the last 2 years, and we're in the process of doing 6 more. It gives us an opportunity to interact under practice conditions, if you would, exercise conditions, to see how our plans and policies and procedures hold up to an actual incident. During a large outage, if a county requests, we will send liaisons to sit in the county location and be kind of our eyes and ears at the county location. We serve 11 counties throughout the state. So we'll send a liaison. The liaison will work with the emergency coordinator in that town, in that county, to help us set priorities for how they want to restore customers throughout the state. So there's multiple times we're interacting with state, municipal, and county agencies.
And certainly before a disaster, as you say, the training efforts give you that contact.
Right.
And then you probably have a relationship with the State Office of Emergency Management as well?
We do. We'll also send a liaison to the State Regional Operations and Intelligence Center if it's a large enough incident. So we'll have eyes and ears there as well. So folks can get in contact with us, and we can get in contact with them. And we also have relationships with our larger customers, as I mentioned, strong relationships with Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and Rutgers, and a lot of our bigger clients as well.
I think you also mentioned, well, not a client, but the Red Cross?
So we do a lot with the Red Cross. We've teamed up on providing some training to our employees as well. We use the Red Cross in programs that we're trying to do some more emergency preparedness and making sure our families are prepared for an extended incident, when the reality is our employees may need to be in work for an extended period. Unlike a lot of circumstances, our employees will be at work at extended hours during a disaster, as opposed to home waiting for conditions to improve. We're in the process of improving conditions so people can resume their lives.
I think you bring up an interesting point, because that person who's on the line is not home taking care of his own flooded basement or her own flooded basement. So I think that's probably an important service. I hadn't really thought about that. I mean, I want them to come to my house, and they have their own needs as well.
Right. And we train and educate and try to help our employees make sure they're ready before hurricane season and throughout the year, in case they have to get called to work for an extended period.
So you tell them to have ready kits too, or what do we call it? Emergency kits?
Emergency kits, go kits, yep, whatever you want to call it. I liked your point earlier when you started. You talked about the important things to have. Prescriptions are very important, even if you just have a copy of the script.
Right.
We also encourage people to have small denominations of cash.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
Because ATMs typically will be down.
Yes.
They were during Sandy, so we say you should have some small denominations just in case you go to a facility that can't make change or the credit card doesn't work.
Right, I hadn't thought of that. One thing in Sandy, when we have done the show previously, they said that, the medications and the scripts and contact numbers, but people would bring their phone and not their charger. And so it really limited their communication with, their other family members and different things like that. And I know pets are not the job of PSE&G or any utility company, but I think local communities are getting more savvy about how to help people with their pets during a disaster as well.
And you can call 211
Okay.
because we do give information on pet-friendly shelters and places where people can bring pets during an emergency or a disaster.
Well, I think it's helpful to get the sense of how you work together and what information you can both provide during a disaster. I mean, I would have never thought of calling 211 to kind of get an update, because sometimes if you have the ability to call out, you don't know who to call.
Right. And it was interesting during Hurricane Sandy to hear callers say, I have no power. And we would say, you're one of many, 2.4 million people. We would let them know they're not alone. We'd let them know anything that we had heard from the utility company as far as an update. So we were, a conduit of information for them from different places that we gain the information from.
And I imagine it provides a level of comfort. I mean, to know you're not the only one sitting in the dark.
Yes.
Listening to your neighbor's generators as opposed to that you don't have one, but that you're feeling, very isolated. So I think that's good to know that you can provide that additional level of service.
Right.
So anyway, so last tips, how to reach you is obviously.
Yes, it's 211 are the numbers you need to remember. If you want to text us, it's 898-211, or you can go to our website, nj211.org, to either chat or to search our database.
Can you say the text again?
Sure, 898-211.
Okay, so that's kind of interesting. And obviously for the utility companies, in most people's bills, they have obviously an emergency number. And so for PSE&G,
Probably the best source would be the website as well, pseg.com. It'll give you a lot of different resources from preparedness, things you can do, similar items to your Go kits, as well as social media ways to get in touch with us as well.
Yeah, I also think sometimes for our viewers, sometimes phoning is the best. So we really will put both options and everything on the screen. But thank you both very much. I really appreciate you spending the time with us today and sharing. I think it's an important program. So Aging Insights is produced by the New Jersey Foundation for Aging. We want to remind you to find out about senior services. Please contact your county office on aging. You will see a listing of their numbers on our website, or you may call the state hotline number, which is 1-877-222-3737. Thank you for watching this episode of Aging Insights, and remember, aging is everyone's business.